Hello everyone, welcome back to Pixie Woo. Today's video I'm going to do for you is all about concealer. Now I did a video about base last week or the week before and people seem to like it, so I thought I'm going to bring back the education again and we're going to touch on concealer because loads of people asked about it. Now concealer is really difficult and I have to say I still haven't found the perfect one concealer that I can use and it does everything. I don't think it exists, I honestly don't. And the thing is, our skin changes. As we get older, we need different things. So I'm going to give you a little brief run through on certain ways of using concealer, how to correct, and things like that. So hope you enjoy it. You might need a cup of tea because these videos seem to be long, but I'm not going to cut them down. That's what we are constantly missing, is we're cutting out all the important stuff, which is the knowledge that you deserve to know, and that's what I want to tell you. Basically, okay, let me get started. Firstly, people say, when do you put your concealer on? Do you put it on before you put foundation on or after you put foundation on? Personally, I prefer to put my concealer on second, so it goes on after my foundation, because my foundation should really be enough. And if there's areas that are still showing the odd blemish through, then I put my concealer over the top. If I use my concealer first, then when I put my foundation on, it kind of blends that away a little bit and I'm going to have to apply it again anyway. So I tend to do it second after foundation, unless I'm only wearing concealer. Now often when I go and pick my kids up from school or collect my kids from school, or take my kids, sorry, pick my kids up and collect are the same, take my kids to school, I'll just run a little bit of concealer under my eyes. And I don't do that for anyone else, I do it because I can't bear how I look. And I might just use a really lightweight concealer, something like MAC Moisture Cover, Clarins Instant Light Concealer, maybe a bit of Charlotte Tilbury Retoucher, or Josie Maran concealer, which is kind of an in-between, it's a bit more. And the reason I choose one of those is because they blend really nicely. So I'll just take my concealer with no makeup on whatsoever, I'll pop a little bit on my finger and I just run it under my eyes. I will always have moisturised my skin first, so by using a lightweight concealer, that's just going to allow it to blend in with my skin. It's normally just the under eyes that I need a little touch of it. So a little touch, just use my finger because I'm in such a rush. And I take that round my nose. And that has just taken away the real depth of me just waking up. So that when I take the kids into school, I don't look like I've literally been pulled out of bed, even though I definitely have. And I'm sure people can see it. It makes me feel better. So I take a little bit on my finger. This is the Clarins one that I'm using now. It depends whichever one I pick up first. Quite often it will be MAC Moisture Cover because it comes on a wand, so I can just pop it on, run it over there, and that's it. I'm ready to go. Rub that in, finger again, anywhere I want a little bit of coverage. And if I do that, then I won't bother with the foundation because that's just taken away a little bit, and I go for a good shine one so that it blends into the skin nicely. That's when I'm not wearing any foundation. I've taken that off. I'm going to pop a little bit of foundation on now. I've got this new foundation that I picked up from Surratt in Liberties the other day, so I'm just going to pop this on. It's quite nice. It doesn't look like I've got anything on, which I like. You know, it just evens the skin tone out. Now, once I'm at this point in my makeup and my base is on, I can see from my skin which parts of my skin I think need more coverage and more help. So I can see that I have blemishes here. Now these are old blemishes, so they're not actually blemishes anymore, they're more pigmentation in my skin. So I need to use something to cover that. I get quite redness on my cheeks. Now, if it's not showing now, but throughout the day it might a little bit. So sometimes I'll run a concealer over those areas. My darkness under my eyes might need a bit of concealer, and on my chin and around my nose need a bit as well. So then you need to choose what sort of concealer texture you want for those areas. And that's the important bit really. Finding the colour, you have to go in and ask or test them on yourself to choose the right colour. I can't advise you on that apart from colour correcting, which I can do in a minute. So for these sorts of areas, I want a concealer that's going to stay put. It's going to set quite matte to the skin because I don't want it to have a shine and bring attention to that area. I want something that's going to go flat and working with my skin nicely. Now a great concealer for that is MAC Studio Finish Concealer, which is this one here. It used to come in little pots. I think you still can get the little pot if you know the colour, or now you can buy them in a pack, which is quite handy because you've got all your seasons there. If you're the lightest one in the winter, then you can go slightly darker as it gets more sunny, and even darker if you get a good tan. And they also do amazing colours for darker skin. So I literally love MAC for that reason. They cater for everyone. So here they've got lots of colours to choose from. You could go for something like Kevyn Aucoin. This does have a slight shine to it, so if you want to still have a glow, then this one's great. Powdered, it sits really well, but it's very, very full coverage. There's so many full coverage ones. You've got a little bit of Creme de la Mer, which is a really nice full coverage, and it sets quite matte with a slight sheen, not completely flat matte. I'm not sure if Laura Mercier still do the high coverage one. You've got Bye Bye Under Eye by It Cosmetics. This has quite a good finish to it, so it's great for those areas. Double Wear by Estee Lauder. These are just some of my favourite ones for doing this. This is the Becca. A lot of these are saying Bye Bye Under Eye and things like that. This one says Concealing Cream, Ultimate Coverage. So this one isn't saying for under the eyes, but some of the high coverage ones say for under eye. Be careful with that, but we'll get onto that bit in a minute. We have got a Cle de Peau one, which is nice for concealing as well. They've all got the same sort of finish. I'm going to stick with the MAC Studio Finish Concealer. And I'm going to choose the colour that works for me. I tend to mix colours. That's why I've chosen this one, because I like to mix colours. And I'm just going to use a brush that is quite dense, but quite large. And you are going to, especially for this sort of blemish, you're going to push it over the skin. So it's really working on the skin, and then the outside you're going to blend with the brush. So over the blemish, that's a tiny bit dark, that palette. I'm going to just stick it up one lighter. This is better, this is slightly lighter. So I'm just going to choose my colour, push it over the area where I have the blemish, or these are actually correctives. This is just colour correcting that I want to do for these. So I'm getting it on the brush and I'm pushing it over the area I want to disappear. So I'm almost using it like a rubber or an eraser. Rubber is something very different in America. And just push it over the skin until it still looks like skin, but it's pretty much disappeared. I'm using minimal product on this. Now, the reason I like this concealer is you can see the texture and the payoff of it. It looks like my skin. It's not got a luminance to it, a luminosity. It just sits flat on the skin. That's what I want. Just really push it over those areas. And if it's not blending completely around the edge, just take your brush and blend around it so it blends those in. Now, if I didn't have foundation on already, this would show a real patch because it wouldn't be even, do you know what I mean? And that would be the only even bit. So I've already got my foundation on, and then I do this step. And you can see it just disappears. Now, the reason you can see that these aren't actual blemishes is because they're sitting really flat on the skin. They're not risen at all, which is why they can disappear perfectly. If they were a blemish, they would sit slightly raised, and that's a whole different thing. Concealer can cover it, but you can't change texture. So that has completely wiped those out. Do I have any more like that one? Like those two? Not really. So that's a great way of concealing pigmentation or dark spots or something like that. You're just going to get your brush and your concealer, and you're going to push that over the skin. Pushing is a key. So you want a brush like this that really blends it in beautifully. This is Real Techniques Deluxe Crease Brush. I love this for concealing until it's zapped it out. Next, I want to pop a little bit more coverage over my cheeks. So I'm going to go for a concealer that's slightly more moisturising in this area. Something like MAC Moisture Cover. these are the concealers that I used first off when I didn't have the I'm dribbling. These are the concealers that I used first off when I didn't have the foundation on. These are the ones that blend really, really nicely, that sit beautifully over the skin. Let's do MAC Moisture Cover, because I do think this is a good one. This is NW20, and I will just run that over my cheeks. I would quite often use the Josie Maran concealer for this, but I know it's not available in the UK, so I'm going to stick for products that I'm hoping you can get elsewhere. This product is comes in lots of colours as well, that's why I'm choosing it to show you. And you can see it just gives me a touch more coverage over the cheeks. I will take that round my nose as well. And it's just worked on that area where I get a little bit of redness. I've not touched anything in my forehead, but still it blends through. It means that you're not getting that really, really full, dense coverage everywhere, which I prefer. I prefer it when you put the coverage where you want it rather than having a complete coverage. Does that make sense? I'm hoping so. Now this one I buff into the skin a little bit more because I want it to look slightly more airbrushed. It doesn't need to give maximum coverage like that area did. It just needs to give me a tiny bit more coverage so that my redness doesn't come through. You can use a colour corrector if you prefer, but I don't like to put tons of products on because you're just building up and building up. And the more products you've got on, unless they're really, really well buffed into the skin, the more layers there is that it will easily slip off if you have a different skin tone, like an oilier skin or something. So really, really lightly buff that into the skin. Now I have a little bit of dryness in my chin at the moment, a tiny bit of eczema, so I'm going to take the same concealer because I don't want anything that's too flat that will show the dryness. And I'm going to pop that on my chin. Any moisturising concealer, it doesn't need to be this one, will work for this. I'm just going to really buff that in. So it's giving me slightly more coverage there where my dryness is. I always get a little bit of eczema when the weather changes for some reason. It's very annoying. Now if you have a blemish that's quite fresh and it's got a little bit of a head on it and you don't want to touch it, or you have just touched it and it might be slightly scabbed over, then you're going to go for something a little bit different. You're going to probably use two concealers. You can either use, depending on your skin, how dry it is, how much coverage you're going for, you're going to use either of these sorts of concealers. And you're going to, I don't actually have one at the moment, you're going to buff them over the area where you have your blemish. So buff it around so that it's giving you a tiny bit more coverage around the blemish, so it doesn't stand out that you've just suddenly concealed that blemish. Let me do it here. I've got a little spot on my nose. Maybe you'll be able to see. Oh, it seems to have gone. Let's do this side because I've got a little one there as well. So you're just going to buff that into the skin. So it's giving you a tiny bit more coverage. Any of those full coverage ones or the light moisturising one, depending on the coverage of your foundation that you've got on first. I've gone for the moisturising one because I haven't got that much of a coverage of foundation on. Then you're going to take yourself either a smaller brush, like a pointed brush, or you're going to get yourself, I like this Charlotte Tilbury Make Your Eyes Bigger pen because it doesn't move, or something like this Smashbox 24/7. And where that blemish tip is, you're going to just pop a dot of that. I'm going to push over it with this. So I'm not moving it, I'm just pushing it into place. So I'm using my big brush first. If you have a smaller brush to do and you're using a fine concealer to push over the top, go for that. Push over the top first so that it's just blended that down a tiny bit. And then if you need more, you're going to go back in with your pen again or your concealer, whichever you're using, and push over again. And you're getting smaller and smaller each time you do it, so that in the end, you just have the very tip of it disappeared. So push over that. That's if you've got one of those blemishes that is quite red and fresh, until it's the same colour. Then you're going to get your powder. And I've got two of these brushes, so I'm going to use a fresh one. And push the powder over the top. Try not to be there too long, because you just want to seal this into place so it disappears. because sometimes these can be a bit weepy or something like that. You're just going to push it over the top and step away, and that's just sealed that into place. If yours is a little bit weepy and it's still showing through, leave it alone and come back to it at the end of the makeup and go in with a little bit of concealer, again, either on your fine brush or the one that you used before, or a little one like this, and just pop it over the top there again. Just so, and you can powder straight over that without blending it, because you've slowly built and built and built that it should disappear. So I'm going to pop a little bit of powder over that on its own, and it should just disappear. So if you've got a party and you've got a party spot, that is going to help. Okay, we're going to move on to under eyes, which is the main problem that everyone has. If you've stuck around for this long into the video, thank you very, very much. I may have lost a few people on the way. Now, what I would love you to do is Google colour wheel, and print it out, or screen grab it, or buy a colour wheel if you're passing an art shop. This is so important when it comes to makeup. Now, you will have you've got one side, and then on the back you will have a triangle, a bigger triangle, a rectangle and a square. Don't worry about anything apart from that one arrow in the middle, that one line that's pointing up and down. That is for complementary. And what that means is, if you have green eyes here and you wanted your green eyes to show up more, you would put a red eyeshadow on, or a warm brown that has a lot of red in, and that is going to make the green in your eyes pop. It's the most complementary colour for that. What that also means that if you have, if you put these two colours on top of each other, they counteract each other out. They don't disappear, they just mute each other and dull each other down a bit. So if you look at your under eyes, now mine, I've got a little bit of makeup on because my foundation went under there, but my under eyes are normally quite purple. So I look at the colour opposite my under eyes and I have got a yellow. And what a yellow is going to do is neutralise out my purple a little bit. So I will go for a yellow colour corrector. I have a few here. I have a Maybelline one, I have got a Naked Urban Decay one, Smashbox one, which is the one I've been using recently, a Rodial Banana one, and an Estee Lauder one. There's loads that you can get. If you are more of a bluey green under eye, you're going to go for a slightly more orangey. So any of these will fit into that. So if you've got slightly more bluey under eyes, you're going to go for a more orangey one. And you've got things like Becca. This is peach. You have got Bobbi brown. This is a very, very subtle peach. You wouldn't have to put anything over the top of that. We have got these, which are amazing. If you've got slightly darker skin and you want this real orange, you're going to put a concealer over the top. This is great for colour correcting anyway. If your under eyes are slightly more of a like dull greeny tone, then you're going to go for something that is slightly more peachy. So around here, then you're going to live here, so you can see where they reflect. And you can get loads. Urban Decay do quite a few peachy ones, or lilac ones. You have got Smashbox do them as well. Smashbox have brought out those ones that say they're for brightening. Is this one say, yeah, don't be dull. So the lilac-y tone is meant to brighten the skin a little bit. So if it looks a bit sallow, then you've got loads for that as well. If you find that your skin, your under eyes are slightly redder, or even your skin, then you're going to go for a green. I would really advise Google, print it out, screen save it, getting yourself a colour wheel, because then you don't have to ask someone else. You can answer all of those things yourself. It makes it so much easier. So my under eyes are slightly more purpley, so I am going to go for a yellow under eye corrector. I want to use this Rodial one, Rodial, whatever, however you say it. And I'm going to pop that under my eyes. I'm going to get my deluxe crease brush and just buff that in. Now, I only use the concealer under my eyes because I want to get rid of my darkness. I don't need concealer here, so I'm not going to apply the concealer here. I might apply it just on that end bit where I have a slightly purpley bit there as well, but I don't need it here. I don't need it because it's not a different colour, but I also don't need it because that's when I smile where my lines are, and I do not want to have more products sitting in my lines than are necessary. If you are slightly younger and you don't have those lines yet, and you can laugh and smile and joke and they don't crack, then you can pop concealer wherever you bloody want. It will look fantastic. You can put it all the way up there. You don't need it, but you can. As we get slightly older, we have to be careful where we place it to make the most of it. So I tend to keep it only in that real divot of the eye. And you can see I'm really pushing this into the eye. I'm not pulling the skin too much. I'm not being harsh on my skin. I'm just pushing it because I want it to work into the skin really nicely. So that has just lifted my under eyes. Still looks natural, but it's lifted them. I don't like how light it looks under my eyes. I literally hate it. I don't want to look like I've, baked or something to my eyes. I want it to look as natural as possible. So then I'll run over the top with a slightly more accurate colour concealer that will just give me a little bit more texture. Now you can go full coverage if you want. I have quite a lot of full coverage concealers. You can go, I will do one either side and you can see. Let's use the Bye Bye under eye, but the light reflecting one. It's just so impossible to get out because it's such a heavy coverage or full coverage concealer. So I'm going to take a little bit of that on my brush and push that under my eyes. I like the more light reflecting one because it does at least give me a little bit of dimension. It's not just completely flat. So I'm just going to, again, work that, not forgetting to go right the way around my orbital bone. I need a tiny bit on that end there. I'm not taking it round here where I get the lines, but a tiny bit just in there where I get a little bit of darkness. On the other side, I am going to take a little bit of Delilah. This one is in Marble. It's a lighter finish, it's more creamy. Just pop that there. Again on top so that it can really blend nicely over the top and bring those two concealers and the concealer and the foundation together so they blend. You can see how much easier that blends and not having to push it into the skin to work in. Personally, I much prefer this side because I think that that's a little bit dense for me, but it's totally up to your personal preference with how much coverage you want to achieve in those areas. So there you go, that's the finished concealing video. I hope it's been helpful for you. You do have to go out and buy the concealer that works for you. If you have pigmentation or colouring differences, then that's something I can answer separately if you wish for, because it all depends on skin tone and the sort of colour it goes and whatnot. It's very complicated, but I can answer that separately as well. I know, especially if you've got darker skin, you might have slightly different pigmentation in certain areas, and it depends whether that's warm or cool pigmentation, if that makes sense. Now, let me just run through a couple of concealers that I really love that you might find helpful. So if I want something that's really glowing on the skin, like the Mum on the Run stuff, or that I use as my second thing over my eyes, it would be the Clarins Instant Light Concealer, the Charlotte Tilbury Retoucher Concealer, Josie Maran Vibrancy Concealer, MAC Moisture Cover Concealer. So then I'm moving on to the middle of the road concealers that are a little bit more coverage than those moisturising ones, but not huge amounts of coverage, not too much coverage, so middle of the road. I really like the Maybelline Anti-Age Erase Eye Concealer. I like the Rimmel Wake Me Up Concealer. The Delilah Take Cover Concealer is really beautiful. And the Bourjois Healthy Mix Concealer is really nice. Then I'm going up another notch, but it's still not at full coverage. I love the Kevyn Aucoin Concealer in, is it called Supernatural? It's not Supernatural, it's a little bit more coverage than Supernatural. I love the Dalla Palma Concealer. This one is in, it doesn't have a name, it's just a Dalla Palma Concealer. NARS Creamy Radiant Concealer is a beautiful one. And I'm going to get a little bit heavier as I go. I do like the Tarte Rainforest of the Sea concealer, but it smells so strong. It's so fumey that it's almost too much. Milk concealer. Then we're going a little bit more coverage as we go. This is the MAC Select Cover Up Concealer. I like this one because it goes on creamy, but it sets very, very matte, so it stays put. Great for blemishes. Becca, this is the Ultimate Coverage. Creme de la Mer, and this one is, it doesn't go very dark, this one. That's my only complaint about it. It is called, doesn't have a name. Okay. Estee Lauder Double Wear Concealer. Kevyn Aucoin, the Sensual Skin Enhancer. Nice mix with the spritz all over the skin as well, but it will give you a full coverage. The Clinique, this is Corrective Concealer. The It Cosmetics Bye Bye Under Eye, either in the light reflecting or the matte one. The Lancome Concealer is, the Camouflage Concealer is very, very good coverage. But these all have a slight sheen to them. Laura Mercier, this is High Coverage Concealer. Not sure if they still do that. And that's about it in my favourites. Oh, I do like the MAC. They've redone these, the Studio Fix Concealer. Boom. Done. They're all my favourites, I would say. I hope you found that interesting, guys. I hope you have retained something from it. I'm sorry, it's a really, really hard thing to explain and talk about. But if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe. And I will see you next time. Take care.